Hi, guys. It's Josh Rubin here in New York with Douglas Elliman, and we're on our latest episode of the Rubin Special, joined by my friends in the Bay Area, top agents, Andrew Raskopf and David Gunderman. Andrew and David, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Josh. It's fun to be here.
Good morning, Josh. Great to see you.
Good morning. I know it's early for you guys, 9 a.m., bright and early. Wanted to check in with you now that your governor has lifted the stay-at-home order now. Am I right?
No, we're slowly lifting. We're not completely out of it yet, but things are opening up.
So it's similar to us in New York in that it's sort of phased, and you know, some areas are less affected by it, and those areas obviously can come out and have some fun and work as normal, and others are still on quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
exactly.
Huh. Okay, and so I know the Bay Area was one of the so-called hotspots sort of early on to adopt the stay-at-home order, and so that's probably one of the last to be released from it, right?
Well, I mean, it's just a very thoughtful and in terms of something like this, they're very conservative. They want to make sure they get it right. Their public safety is top of mind. So I'm actually really proud of our local governments and how they've handled it. And actually, they've been, I guess, maybe through the lobbying efforts of our local associations or the California Association of Realtors, they've also been working really hand in hand with our industry to make sure that we weren't crippled throughout this. And it's really made it very reasonably palatable for us to be nimble and pivot and survive this.
Yeah, well, survival is really critical, and it's important that we take those necessary precautions in order to, stay safe, keep our family safe, of course, and really keep our friends and our clients safe in the process. But it's also important that we, remain to have some degree of, the ability to sort of, conduct our business and stay in touch with people. What are you guys doing differently in order to sort of stay top of mind and keep your business afloat?
Well, for years, here we are right here. I mean, for years, the conversation has all been about digital and video, and now that has really come home to roost. So we've stormed into digital, we've stormed into social media, we've stormed into video in big ways, and it's about trying to package your message and get it out to people in new formats and make sure that our business, our core business is the foundation of our business is very relational. Our specific business, I mean, everybody does business differently, and ours is very high touch, contact, relational business. So being disarmed of things like open houses felt really devastating to us at first. So we had to figure out ways to sort of get down to our core values and package them in ways that we can get out to consumers, and boosting and advertising and all sorts of things, creating these little videos that sort of create the essence of who we are and what we do. And it's really been quite effective. Business has always come to us very, very organically, and we don't like to be solicitous at all. And as a consequence, we hadn't really done a lot of drip marketing in our careers, and we had never done a serious newsletter or anything like that. And now we have really, because the times required it and people wanted information so hungrily, we moved into the newsletter space. And I cannot believe the great feedback we're getting from our database and our clients. They're actually asking us, like, please keep sending these. They're so thoughtful and they're so informative, like, please, please, please. And I think a little bit of that has to do with the fact that, our country is so sorely lacking in leadership right now at the top, that any sort of voice of reason or expertise or knowledge is really resonating for people right now.
Yeah, we have a lot of fear in today's society, and it's important that we put the fear aside, put it behind us. And of course, there's reason to be fearful when you turn on the news, but it's important that we really focus on the facts and the data, and we deliver, the reality of what's happening in today's society. And I just got off the phone with a client of mine who unfortunately is in the hospitality space, and his business has been impacted, profoundly by this. His properties have literally had to shut down, and of course, no one saw this coming. And so he's contemplating selling his space here in the city, and just kind of staying at his house upstate. And he's afraid that he's not going to be able to get what he paid for it. And I said, well, there are actually examples of people paying more than you paid for your space, in a very similar, type of loft, and that property went to contract and closed during the pandemic. Yes, you closed before it, but the bottom line is things are not as bad as we think they are. and certainly not as bad as the media would lead us to believe. And the media is really just feeding into the public's fear by telling them, frankly, misleading information about things that aren't happening. CNBC reported a week or two ago that there was only one deal over $4 million. Well, I went into my database immediately after that. I found that there were 6 deals over $4 million, and that there had been 54 deals that had closed between, I think it was May 15th when I had this conversation. And it was between April 1st and May 15th, there had been 54 deals that had closed over $4 million. So in reality, things are continuing to happen in New York City. Yes, they're not happening at the pace that we would like them to, but it's important, Andrew and David, that we actually are able to deliver the facts.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, you've gotten into the newsletter space where, that's something that you really haven't done that much. Things, as you said, have come to you more organically and naturally. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of what you're doing with the newsletter, what information you're providing?
Oh, it's exactly what you just said. You articulated it so beautifully. I mean, it's really important that we not in any way try to be predictive, because we're in uncharted territory here. There's no way I think anyone who tries to predict anything is just undermining their reputation. It's just, who knows where this is all headed? Who knows how this virus will behave? But it's just really important about empowering people with facts and figures, and because we control so much of our market, we have. And we have this large team, like it's like foot soldiers in the war, and everyone comes back and reports. So we have all these little anecdotes and all these little nuances that speak to these micro moments that speak to the macro. So we try to really focus on those little things so that we can let the consumer sort of draw their own conclusions about what's happening on a broader perspective, but just feeding them with information and data about what we're experiencing on the ground, and giving them some ideas, contextualizing it a little bit here and there when we feel anchored in a point of view. And also, one of the things that I think people enjoy is we had a few ideas early on about how the market was shifting that didn't bear out. So we really circled back and said, hey, we got that wrong. We thought that this wasn't going to matter so much to consumers anymore. And it turns out it matters even more than we ever expected. So we're all just staying really human in the conversation and just finding those data points that will resonate for folks.
Yeah, and our market's doing really well. We're transacting. I mean, we probably put 14 or 15 properties into escrow during COVID, and some of them had record prices. So we're not feeling the constriction yet. And we're dealing now, and as I'm sure you are, with people who come to our properties are serious buyers, right? I mean, there's no
looky loos
coming in any longer, right? So it's a much more vibrant market relative to serious engagement with everyone who's coming to the forefront. So that's really exciting to see. I don't know how long that will last economically. We don't, as David was saying, we don't predict and we don't have a crystal ball. But right now, things are strong in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Andrew, you mentioned that a couple of the homes that you put into escrow were at record prices. What do you attribute that to?
I think we were as surprised as anyone, when the offers came in, and we had a couple that were, record prices with, more than one offer. It wasn't just one kind of outlier that overpaid. I mean, there were multiple offers that came in that were strong. So
it's low inventory and pent up demand is exactly what it is. And that's
what
the whole thing. I mean, real estate is always supply and demand. That's what it's all about. And in fact, if I had any concern about the future market, is that I see a lot of supply coming on. And I'm a little bit worried that the buyer pool has been blunted somewhat because of the new lending restrictions and furloughs and layoffs and things like that. So if the supply gets too heated, then we could be in some sort of more shaky territory in terms of the listing side of things. May become more of a buyer opportunity. We'll see. But so far that hasn't borne out. There just hasn't been enough inventory to feed all the consumers out there. Limited geography, a lot of jobs in the Bay Area, a lot of wealth, and shockingly, I'm sorry, I know like a lot of cash offers, a disproportionate amount of cash offers than we ever see this time of year, as if people were taking their money out of other investments and moving it into real estate. I've never quite seen that that happens so starkly. What were you going to say?
Yeah, and I think one of the major contributing factors for us is, we're heavily influenced by tech, and tech is feeling energized right now. I mean, we have Slack here, we have a lot of, tech centers that are thriving in this new world of video and working from home. So I think that that hasn't diminished at all. I mean, I think that's really become, a more influential factor in our market as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have these tech hubs, of course, in the Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area with, companies like Twitter, Slack, et cetera. Just because these companies are telling their employees that they can stay home and work remotely doesn't mean that these areas aren't going to be the center of activity, for these fields today and in the future. It just means that the workspace is going to be used a little bit differently. But I think that people really, appreciate the communities that they live in, and the individual will continue to be magnets for their friends and colleagues, because just as they like living there, so too do other people. And, I think that the second home market might go through a little bit of a resurgence. The same client that I mentioned earlier in the hospitality space, just coincidentally, because there's so much interest in areas like Upper Westchester and Rhinebeck in the Hudson Valley here in New York, which is a strong second home market. He got an unsolicited offer for a very strong number from a buyer, and he's considering selling that, but he really likes that house. And so there's a lot of this thought process behind the second home market. I saw an article the other day about Connecticut, where people are, going out there and saying, hey, I'd like to rent for the season. They're finding that the rental market has such limited supply that they're saying, you know what, we can buy a house for $500,000, $1 million, even $2 million, and it can be our weekend or country house. Are you guys seeing any of that in the Bay Area? And if so, what communities are attracting weekend residents?
We are seeing that in the Bay. We're seeing that same migration in different ways. I've had more people ask me for a referral to Lake Tahoe than I usually have. A higher percentage of people are asking for those referral sources to that area. And also, I think the nuance we're seeing is that what geographically we have the Bay and we have the flats right off the Bay, which are where there's a lot of walkability and cafes and amenities and transportation, and then the hills that come up right behind it. And for about, I guess, 12 or 15 years, the hills have been out of fashion, and the flats have been very much in fashion. Everybody wants density and that sense of urban and that sense of community and walkability. And what we're seeing is it's starting to tip back into the hills again. Everyone's sort of, hey, I wouldn't mind a few trees and a little more elbow room and a little more space between my neighbors and feeling a little less density. So that is all starting to shift.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how our market shifts relative to how we engage with homes now after post-COVID or during COVID, right?
Sure,
we're working from home. We're all home together. Is your home big enough to handle, everyone sheltering together? I mean, these are really influential components in our marketplace. It's going to be fascinating.
Does your home give you the experiences you want during your downtime?
It's never been more important.
That X factor. Do I have, my game space or whatever you need to feel like you want to be too comfortable?
It's just never been more important, and it's never been more articulately defined. I think in terms of real people are really kind of dialing it in now. So it's going to be fascinating to see kind of a year from now, looking at the metrics, and analyzing what the influence really was. But there's going to be a big shift. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know you guys both personally and professionally, so I know a little bit of your story, but, for our viewers at home who've never met you before, you've had a pretty robust career, but you both come to it from somewhat different backgrounds. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the business?
You started, so you lead it. All of them in.
I don't know how far back you want us to go, but Andrew's from New York and grew up in an artistic way. He was a dancer with American Ballet Theater and a bartender at Studio 54 and a monk and a beekeeper and a restaurateur and had a marketing agency in the Bay Area. He's lived out here for about 30 years.
Yeah.
I was also, I grew up in LA, but I by way of New York, I was living in New York in mostly the 90s as a performer and performed on Broadway and throughout the country. And while I was on a national tour of a Broadway show, I met Andrew in the Bay Area and we fell in love and had this long distance relationship for a year and a half, moved out here.
Honestly, I wanted to move back to New York.
Yeah.
But at the last minute, he pulled the plug and came here.
It all worked out, and
some mixed messaging there, right? And David winding up out here, and you wanted to be back there.
It all worked out. And anyway, I worked for a magazine for a little while, and then right around the year 2000, when the first tech meltdown was happening, the magazine I was working for started to lay everyone off. And Andrew and I were just buying our first house in Alameda and getting ready to adopt our children. We adopted 2 kids out of the foster care system, and I decided to go into real estate. It was a total default career for me. The person who helped us buy our home in Alameda was a good guy, and I always thought, real estate agents are used car salesmen. I totally had that bias in me. This guy had a major impact on our lives, and I thought, well, God, if I can be a fiduciary, if I can really advocate for people and be one of the good guys, I think I could maybe stomach this, and dabbled in it, and then it just took off like a lightning bolt, and discovered what a great career it is in terms of all the things you get to do and the ways you get to impact lives, and it just took me by surprise. And then about 2 years in, Andrew decided to quit his very steady job, which was dangerous and scary for us with young children building a business, but it was a leap of faith that we took, and it was 2 cogs that came together, and it just made us soar. We haven't looked back. We've really enjoyed these last 20 years in this business. Yeah,
we've always felt that because we did have kind of a bias going into it, we were really intentional about finding our own path, basically, not kind of doing what everybody else was doing. I mean, our success is really kind of ridiculous. We shouldn't have the kind of success we have based on the things you're supposed to do. I mean, we really never had it. We never kept our database or our CRM, right? I mean, we just didn't really advertise, but because we lived in a smaller community where, again, we're walking billboards, right? After we work with somebody, our clients are walking billboards. And that was really the kind of driving force for us in terms of establishing ourselves in the smaller community of Alameda. And then we just kind of started to grow outside the confines of the island, which is a little island off, those of you that know the East Bay, into the East Bay market, at large. And it's been really powerful and a lot of fun. We really.
What company, Andrew, did you guys actually start with?
Oh gosh, we started with a
little boutique agency in Alameda called Kane and Associates, started by this woman Marie Kane, who was a former teacher. She still is an incredible woman, just great ethics, a wonderful teacher. And she just provided a wonderful atmosphere for us to kind of learn the business. And she mentored us along with a couple of other top agents in that office. And, it was a really lovely way to kind of introduce ourselves to the business. And
that's great.
Then after that, we did move to Alon Pinnell, which was a local California Bay Area real estate agency, privately owned. I think probably they were 25 years in the business.
Yeah, about that.
Until Compass, they were one of the companies that Compass snapped up, and we just were not feeling the vibe with Compass, so we've ended at Keller Williams, and we're really thrilled to be part of Keller Williams. It's a wonderful, again, it's a company that reflects our core ethics. Our value proposition is absolutely aligned with Gary Keller and the organization at large, and we've been here now about 5 or 6 months, and we're really feeling a great fit.
We're at a point in our careers too where mentorship and giving back and teaching others is just, you're at that point in your lives when you want to, that's part of the next sort of phase in the course of happiness. And Keller Williams is an organization that's all about giving back and sharing and mentoring. And that's just, we're just plugging into that in ways that really feel good.
Yeah. So, I've heard very good feedback from, our friends and colleagues at Keller Williams about, the overall culture in the company. And, many have been very happy with it. So I'm not surprised to hear you guys say that, you're happy with this latest move. And, congratulations again. I know it's fairly recent. What, about 6 months at this point?
February. Yeah. Just this last February.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
And so you really haven't skipped a beat with that jump, right?
No, and that's always a scary thing because the data is that whenever you do a brokerage change, that your business suffers that year. But no, it hasn't skipped a beat. In fact, it feels. I mean, of course, everybody's felt some loss of business during this COVID moment. There's several sellers that I'm so grateful were able to pivot and get back into their homes because they weren't. It was too much stress and too much to handle. It was too disruptive. Several of those are now calling and saying, "Okay, now I will do it." But But yeah, so business is down, but not in any significant ways. We never, had to, lay anybody off. And, one person did take some personal time off for a personal reason, but nobody got laid off. We really doubled down on our business and held true and kept our people together. And it's been really extraordinary.
Wow. So that's remarkable. You guys just kept on sailing right through it.
Yeah.
He didn't sleep for about 2 months.
We didn't take a lot of time off.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing, is a lot of people were talking about, you talk to your friends and they're talking about like how quiet it is and it's so lovely to bake. And I was like, you have time?
Yeah. Andrew and David, here in New York, agents, there's a variety of different agents, right? There's the people who've been in the business for 50 years and they kind of work the building where they live, and they, put on a nightie and they go up and they show their listing. And, if you don't like it, so what? They never follow up. And, they just kind of take people from the laundry room who are thinking about selling, or, somebody just went into a nursing home, or, this couple, moved into a 2-bedroom across town. And then, there are agents who work their sphere. And, they kind of take a referral here or there, and they do maybe 10 or 15 deals a year. And then there are agents who work their neighborhood, who's sort of an expansion of their sphere. And then there are agents who are all over town, right? You'll meet an agent who has a listing one day in Battery Park, and then the next day they'll have a listing on the Upper East Side. They have various lead sources. So, in San Francisco, it's much more spread out. Of course, one of the things that San Francisco is known for is its traffic. Of course, the hills and the trolleys, but being in San Francisco, how does a successful agent in San Francisco, sell both in the flats and the hills, work in Oakland and Marin County? Or you hear about Sonoma and Napa. I mean, these are all different markets. So how do you guys adapt to the different neighborhoods, and what neighborhoods specifically do you focus on and serve?
Yeah, we are almost entirely East Bay. So we are Oakland, Berkeley, Alameda, Piedmont. Then there's other points like Contra Costa, which is La Mirinda, which breaks down to Lafayette and Moraga and Orinda. Then there's little ancillary areas like El Cerrito and Emeryville and Kensington and places like that. Mm-hmm. If we have a client that needs help in San Francisco or Marin County, we have really strong partner relationships in those areas. So we'll partner up with people if it's something that we want to be, or we'll just refer it. But even our territory that I just described is a very large territory. We have 8 agents working it, and again, we all information share, so we're really effective. We're very proud of the fact that we like to say amongst ourselves that we represent people and not price points. Yep. We don't want to get caught in one market segment. Really, we want to take good care of people, not just try to be one little segment of the market. And that just keeps you thriving under all circumstances. It keeps you nimble and helps you pivot when there's all these like market shifts. So and one of the hardest things for us to hear actually is when the person selling their very precious 1-bedroom condo calls and says, you guys are so luxury. You probably don't want my listing. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, you are the child of our former client. We want to take care of you. Like we will bring all that luxury service to your 1-bedroom condo. Let's kill this.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people all the time that I bring just as much dedication to a $500,000 studio apartment that I do to, a $5, $10 or more $1 million, penthouse, or, whatever the listing might be. Because, at the end of the day, we care about the people that we're working with. It's not about the listing that's attached to the person. It's about the person that we're representing, right?
Absolutely.
That is at the heart of everything. And
sometimes those people are the most gratifying experiences. They see how you sort of present their property and elevate it, and they're like, wow. And sometimes people who are more well off have had a lot of people cater to them over time. So it's they're a little harder to impress sometimes. It's those people who are just like, you're changing their lives. That feels so good.
Yeah. So you guys told me earlier that you put 14 or 15 properties into escrow during the sort of pandemic, which is really an admirable number. And that's a huge number for so many people, because a lot of people don't do that in an entire year. But
Right.
here in New York, there have been rumors of agents getting fined, and in some cases, their licenses are being threatened to be suspended or revoked entirely. So we're really trying to be careful. And in fact, Douglas Elliman, and I believe Corcoran, has gone so far as to say to various vendors, including photographers, floor plan designers, etc., that we can't schedule photography. Now, of course, we're finding ways around that because what sellers do in the dark of night directly with the vendors is up to them. So we're sort of letting them work it out. But are there any similar rules that are impacting your day-to-day business?
Yeah, it was a hard time. I mean, we're at the point now where we're fully up and running. There's nothing we can't do. I mean, even stagers are essential at this point, and that's been great. But there have been all these moments during this sort of shelter in place and moments when we can do this, we can't do that. We could only show vacant homes for a while, not occupied homes. So we had sellers leaving the area so that their home could become vacant and then show it. Or there was a moment when you could have photographers, then you couldn't have, and then you could have photographers. And at the point where they let stagers in was when it all sort of opened wide open, when it became wide open. One of the tricky things for me, for instance, just anecdotally, was there was a moment when shelter in place hit that we had a house where all the staging was just piled in the garage, and the house was vacant, and the people had moved out, and they were pregnant and really scared and needed to get their house sold. And it sat there for about 2 weeks while we were all sort of paralyzed. And one day I said to our son, I'm like, let's get your gloves on. That house has been in its own self-quarantine for 2 weeks. We're going over there and we're staging it. So we just moved to the furniture and put the yard up and put whatever we got it done. And did our gimbal and our you get in the trenches, you do what you have to do to take care of people. So we've very strictly stayed within the guidelines, and this thing is a killer. So and it hit a member of our team,
wow,
her closest relatives, and that really shook us up. We were like, it reminded us that this is not something we can play fast and loose with. You've got to be very, very careful with this thing. So it had another client of ours who moved to the Hudson Valley has been struggling with it. My sister is struggling with it right now. There's a lot of people that this can really hurt. So we have been very, very, it's a moment of major, excuse me, sort of core ethic crisis. You really have to figure out how to behave. And there was a lot of moments there where all of us were freewheeling it because we didn't know what to make of it. And the hardest thing for me was those moments when they said, you have a vacant house, you can't bring a painter into it, the seller's gone, no one's touching it, it's probably the most pristine environment there is out there. And you can't use, I don't know if I already said this, but you can't use your painter, and your painter's calling you and saying, I need work. I can't put food on the table right now. Can I go somewhere as a solo individual and paint a house right now? And the answer had no, unfortunately, but it was just an ugly ethical dilemma at that moment.
But now that's changed. That painter can do work for you and your clients, right?
So we had everything just sort of ready for the second things changed, we stormed in. And the second something changed, we stormed in so that we could get our clients' homes on the market faster than anyone else so that they could take the greatest advantage of the supply and demand imbalance.
Yeah. That's a good point that you raise. And that is that, with limited supply and we still have just as much demand as we did. So we're almost seeing this sort of point to point from where we left off in terms of the activity, right? We're not seeing this, this pattern following, that dip in equities. We kind of skipped over that because equities have bounced back. So consumer sentiment is basically where it was, where we left off. In fact, it might even be stronger because people have been held back, just as you're describing, not being able to get into homes to stage, to prepare them for the market as soon as you could. And it was listed and people could come and look at them. You had this unbelievable sort of rip-roaring set of activity, and that's part of how you've been able to put so many homes into escrow or contract in such little time.
Yeah, exactly right.
So going forward, Andrew, over the summer, what do you see activity being like?
I don't know. I mean, I really think a lot of it's going to hinge on what happens after we open up. If we have a second wave, I think that's going to freak people out, as it should. Economically, we're going to have to kind of see where things play out. I think there's going to be some serious impact. I mean, you can't shut down capitalism for as long as we have without paying a price for it. So I think there's going to be great opportunity for people. And, again, we have the supply and demand component driving our marketplace more than anything. And that's certainly in place. So I feel like we're going to be okay for a while. And hopefully, we'll work things out economically and just kind of keep the machine going. But, people are here. People need homes. There's a lot of movement in the Bay Area, like New York City, right? I mean, people come and go all the time, and those things are not going to be changing. So I feel really optimistic, actually. I mean, we're gonna have to figure out how to do things differently. I mean, the open house is kind of gone.
Right.
People who get into properties now need to supply a PEAD form to us, which is, a whole kind of comprehensive warning of how to behave in the property. But, if 3 people go into a property now, it usually produces 1 offer. So, it's a very different marketplace. It's a much more concentrated marketplace. And I think it's going to be very vibrant. And it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out relative to agency in the area too, because I have a feeling this is going to be very hard for a lot of new agents coming into the marketplace. I mean, this is going to be, I think the biggest shift is, in any kind of down market or where things become more tentative and need more expertise, the top agents are usually the ones that start to gain, some momentum in those moments in the marketplace. So I think that shift is going to, be really hard in our industry relative to a lot of other people.
One of the things that I find most interesting about the moment, for this may be too regionally personal, so stop me if this is not interesting, but we've been in a market for years where people price under in order to create these bidding wars, and you set an offer date 14 days in, and then you see how far you can get it up the pole, and now that's different because we can't expect that there's necessarily an environment of competition, that there's enough people getting through that you can expect there to be competition. So we've moved into what's being described in our area as a transparent pricing, really pricing things for the expectation. And that's been really working for us during this period of time. I'm starting to see some agents creep back into old habits. And if one person starts to underprice, if your house is worth 1.4 and that person's pricing at 995 and you're pricing at 1.4, the energy is going to go over to the 995. It's just consumer behavior. It's consumer psychology. So I'm a little nervous about the fact that we might be stepping back into old habits, and I'm going to regret that if we do, because I like to be a more honest person. But we also have to play the game, and if it's in our client's best interest to get back in that game, we're going to have to follow suit. But it's just, that's one of the micro dynamics of our market that I'm really fascinated by right now.
Yeah, it will be fascinating.
It's interesting that you say that, David, because when I meet a prospective seller, the way that I approach pricing is a little bit different, right? I tell people very succinctly that you have 3 different choices to make. You can price it exactly where we think the market is. You can price it above where we think the market is and maybe add in a little bit of room for negotiation, or you could price it below where the market is. But ultimately, the market is going to be the bearer of true value. And so you don't control it. I don't control it. And frankly, not even the buyer controls it, because a lot of people say, well, what is this worth? Well, it's worth what someone is willing to pay for it. And I don't agree with that sentiment. I think it's worth what the market indicates it's worth, but you can't just look in the rearview mirror at what's sold. You have to take current conditions into consideration as well as future trends. In other words, you have to be sort of the bottom line educator in how people are trending. Is there optimism? Is there pessimism? If there's pessimism, we've seen over the last 3-4 years with one uncertainty after another, it's smart to price in such a way so that that the momentum or energy of the market is at your back, sort of like the wind in your sails. And so it's like when you're on a boat, in order to get from point A to point B, oftentimes you have to tack back and forth because you're not sure which direction the wind is going, or there's not enough wind. And so when you're pricing property, you want to price it with the wind at your back, right? I think. And ultimately, I've had experiences where we've priced it just right and hit it right on the nose. And that's why historically, most of our listings tend to sell at their ask or closer to their asking price than our competition, i.e. for more money and in less time. So we're not necessarily pricing it low. like the situation that you just described, saying, well, here's a house similar to yours that's priced at 1.4 or sold recently at 1.4, so we're putting it at 995. That's a big jump, 30 to 40%. You might see one or two of those a year in our market, but not much more than that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you see those jumps, the 30, 40% or 20% or more jumps in your market?
All the time.
It was daily.
I mean, for 15 or 20 years, the Bay Area market, at least in the East Bay, has been an auction market. It's price it below some ridiculous threshold and just see how far it'll run up. And that's one of the ways that we've manipulated the market in our area. And quite frankly, because of the supply and demand component, it has influenced our bottom line here. And houses appreciate in the Bay Area in ridiculous numbers, and 40% is really pretty common.
Yeah, no, I mean, our average overbid, like over the course of selling 100 to 140 homes a year, our average is about 30% over the ask price.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's your average over the asking price.
Yeah,
is about 30%. Did I hear that correctly?
But the asking price is set low. It is set low.
It's arbitrarily set low.
That is the culture of our real estate market. It is not.
And so what do you do when you're representing a buyer looking for a, say a 4-bedroom in Oakland, and they see the perfect house and it's asking $995, and they're coming to you from Chicago where things are, regularly selling for, say, 10% below, and you say, yeah, this house is asking $995, but you're going to need to be at 1.4. Like, what is that conversation like?
Oh, it starts with comps and list price versus sales price. It's pretty easy to kind of show those metrics to people, right? And we have a very highly engaged, intelligent buyer pool circling. They understand the games, so when they sit down with an agent, generally, I mean, as a listing agent, you want a group of buyers sitting down with their agent, looking at them going, what do I have to pay to get this, right? And that's where, generally the overbid, the outlier that really jumps the pack is the one that wins the prize, right? And I agree with you, Josh. Have they paid the actual real value of the property? Probably not, but the market spoke. And they were victorious. But I think that is one shameless way that real estate agents in the Bay Area have influenced our market relative to its value.
And in terms of the buyers, we just have to really educate them up front, because we want their learning curve to be like that if they're coming out here from Chicago or wherever. And it's sometimes it's absolutely like it's incomprehensible to them, but the data is there. It's very easy to present. And honestly, if your client is looking for a $1.3 million house, they need to know that they're probably looking at nothing listed any higher than 1.1.
Yeah, probably more like 99.
And probably more like 99. Right. And if you see something for 1,295, that is probably going to sell for 1.5 or 1.6. That's not your price point. And you just sort of show them all the data, and then you just steer them in the right directions, and they figure it out fairly quickly. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds, and that's your value. I mean, that's the value of why this sort of online broker is not in your friend, is because it's the understanding of these nuances and how to get the pricing right and how to build the relationships and how to get you into contract. That's our value. It's not about finding the house. Anyone can find a house right now, and once in a while you have somebody say to you, my broker's doing nothing. I found this house on my own. It's like, you don't understand what their job is. It's not finding a house anymore. It's getting you a contract for the least amount of money and the maximum amount of protection.
That's right. And in fact, a colleague of mine, Rob Gross at Douglas Elliman, he put it fairly eloquently a few years ago when he said, working with a buyer in today's market, it's not just about finding the opportunity, it's about making the entire process three-dimensional. And as you put it, David, it's very nuanced. I tell people all the time that every single transaction is as unique as a snowflake, right? I mean, sure, we've sold thousands of houses in our career, but not one of those transactions was exactly the same. They might have been in the same building, or in your case, on the same block or same neighborhood or same house style, but each house has a different personality to it architecturally. They all have different conditions. Some of them have water issues. Some of them have termites. And then when you add to that, not just the property itself, but the personalities involved, there are so many layers and nuances, and you really have to be an expert at how to navigate these challenges that might lie ahead. And certainly you will encounter as a buyer or a seller.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so much chaos in real estate, and that's why we haven't been replaced. And there's so many ways we protect people. I mean, even on the listing side, we bake in a small budget for that we almost always call like chaos, because something's going to happen. Some neighbor's going to come and complain that tree has been driving them crazy for years, and then they're going to create this conflict idea that a buyer is going to be scared of, like they don't want to enter into conflict, so we're going to have to like stop everything and fix that fence or take care of that drainage issue or whatever it is that you didn't see coming. There's always a curveball, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of our project management team and all the people who are out there to just solve problems all day long, because things always come up, always.
Absolutely. And with that, problems do always come up. But the good news is I think we're through the worst of them during these last 3 months. And so I really appreciate you, Andrew and David, for joining us today on the Rubin Special. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
What fun.
It's great to see you, Josh, and take care and give our love to New York. We have a special place in our hearts.
Will do. It'll be here when you get back, I promise.